So you're at the point where you need a logo for your game. Now there's a few different kinds, but today we're going to be focusing on the more complex kind because ironically it's actually easier to make because it works for way more titles. For example, something like Among Us has a really simple logo, but it only works because one of the letters can be replaced by something that looks like it, which most games can't do. And then a title like Garry's Mod is extremely simple, but it came out over 15 years ago where the indie landscape was way different, so if you were to make a logo like that now, I think it would just dissuade more people than it would interest. I've done a lot of logo research, and in my opinion, some of the best game logos come from the Kirby games. They have a lot going on, but they're still really easy to read, and they're really good looking even as just an art piece, which I don't think can be said for these logos. The Japanese logos for the Pokemon games I think are in the same boat too, and this is roughly the style we're going for. And I know you might be thinking it wouldn't fit your game or that it's way too hard to make something like that, but it's surprisingly adaptive so you can remove a lot of layers to simplify it, which I'll be doing for my example. So now we're going to need a font. I usually just go to fontmeme.com, but you could use any website. And typically you're going to want to just go to collection and then click on a tag on the right that matches your game. Almost every font on this website can be used for whatever you want, so you shouldn't have to worry about any legality issues. That being said, I would obviously avoid anything instantly recognizable like the Google or Netflix font, because a lot of the time it will just look lazy. For my title, I've decided to use the Badab font because I think it will work well. And then you're going to want to type the name into here, set the size to something around 150 or bigger if you have a short title, and then make it white. After that, just right click and copy it, and then you're going to want to paste it into something like a 2000 by 2000 canvas in your editing program, which I'll just be using GIMP here, but the steps should be the same for any program. For my example, I'm going to be using a concept game I've thought about making before called Nuki 64, about a girl who's part Tanuki and using the 64-bit art style. So I'm going to work those themes into the logo, and then later I'll show you the finished logo in the context of the game's title screen, which I'll be releasing a guide for alongside this video. And then the first thing I'm going to do is smooth it out a little bit. This isn't a required step, I just want mine to have a more rounded appearance, so I'm going to apply the Oilify filter to it, which is basically just anti-aliasing and cutting off a bit of the corner. After that, you're going to want to select the contents of your layer, grow the selection by something like 15 or 20, and then on a new layer fill it in. Realistically, you can use any color. Here I'm just going to use black because I don't think you can really go wrong. Depending on your font and thickness, there might be some small holes in your outline, so I would just fill them in. Bigger holes like the ones between my K and I and 6 and 4 I think are fine though. Next thing we're going to want to do is duplicate the outline layer we just made and move it either down to the right or down and to the right. And this is basically just meant to function as a way to make it look more 3D. If you have something like a subtitle or a title that's on multiple lines, you could have each line's 3D effect going a different direction. For mine though, I'm just going to go down and to the right. After that, we're going to again select the content of our original layer and this time apply a gradient to it. Usually you want to go from a light hue of one color to a darker hue of another color, so here I'm just going to go from light orange to a darker pink. It obviously doesn't need to be a gradient though, I just think for my logo it's going to look better with one. Next thing I'm doing after this is adding something to break up the colors a bit. I'm just going to use a couple of stripes, but you could use anything. Like if your game took place in the city, it could be a cityscape, or if it's about cats, it could be paw prints. But yeah, you really can't go wrong with just simple shapes or patterns either. For this effect, all you need to do is create a new layer, and then make whatever you want to use for it white, and then just set its mode in the top right to overlay. Then just adjust the opacity, and because it's in the overlay mode, you can still move it around and it won't show itself on top of your dark outline or the alpha channel. The next step is very game dependent, and it's probably the hardest part. So because my concept game is about a girl who's part Tanuki, I'm just going to give my logo ears and a tail. If your game was about space, maybe you'd want it to have a shooting star, or if it was about medieval combat, maybe you'd want a sword stabbing through it. But basically you just want to take the most major aspects or themes of your game and figure out what would work best. So I went ahead and gave those objects the same treatment the text had, and now we're on to the next phase. So now that we're getting toward the end, I like to duplicate my entire project, and on a new one merge all of the visible layers together. After that, I select the contents of this layer, and then grow the selection again by something like 15 or 20, and then paste in white on a new layer. After that, I'm going to select my outline color and then duplicate it. This duplicate will again be set to the overlay mode, and I'm going to apply a slight Gaussian blur to it just so it's not super sharp. And then I'm also going to move it over to the side where it's visible. It's meant to add a little bit more depth, and it's really easy to play around with. Next, I'm just going to add a drop shadow behind everything, and then play around with some opacity and sliders to see how it changes things. The last part of making anything like this should just be twisting knobs, because sometimes some really low effort changes can make really big impact. Here I ended up increasing the saturation of everything, and I think it turned out really nice. And so yeah, here you can see it in the context of my title screen, which like I said earlier, a guide for making this screen will be released the same time this video is, as well as a few other videos. So if this was something you enjoyed, you should check out my other stuff too, and subscribe if it seems like something you're into. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me on Twitter, or leave a comment below. But that's all for now, peace.